Welcome to Talk to 'em podcast, where I'm the co-host, Christopher, aka Brown Swagger, and we have our host, J. Rob, and we talk about different things that are going on in the world today. With us, we have special guest, Dirk, who also has a podcast, Regular Amazing People, Dirk, aka Shorty D. And then we also have with us today a special guest, Jack Adams, a former co-worker of mine. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having a really impactful conversation with you. So I turn it over to you, Jay.
Thank you. Yeah, so today the topic of discussion is going to be social injustice. We've been on Derek's podcast a few different times, and we've had these conversations. And I always find it beneficial to have a conversation like this as opposed to getting on Facebook and typing it out. I'm on social media a lot, and I see people going back and forth on these issues, and it never ends well because what you can't really tell the tone of someone, or you can't really sense, get a sense of their energy when they're typing things out. It just, you don't know. So as people are typing back and forth about these different things, they got their different points of views. There's a lot of friction going on, a lot of debates, and I'm not all into all of that, so I shy away from it. But I do want to, I do think getting on a setting like this and openly discussing the social issues and getting different perspectives and points of views is very beneficial and very productive, right? So today I want to talk about the topic again of social injustice. As everyone knows, there's been just a lot of issues going on within our country. We got the pandemic that has taken its toll on all of us. Right now most of us are working remote, so that's taxing. We got the social injustice that continues to be a thing. Ever since Cap was in the NFL and he was taking a knee for some of the social issues that were going on that continue to exist, that's something that's impacting everyone as well. And I think it's taking its stress and toll on everyone. And I think it's good to just talk these things out. So I want to give you guys a story and start from there, and then we can expand on that. From my perspective, a lot of these social issues, I'm very used to them. I grew up, being right in the middle of police brutality and just police harassment and stereotypes, the whole 9 yards. I'm used to it. It's happened to me. I'm not one that brings it up a lot, but I do share it every now and then, just so people are aware. It's not a thing that just is surprising. This stuff happens and people need to know about it. But I'm at the point now where I'm like tired. To me, we've come a long way, and it's just like I'm ready for us to unite, and just come together as a country and just stop the nonsense. I'm tired of racism. I'm tired of people stereotyping. I'm tired of people thinking that black people are dangerous and all cops are bad. I mean, we need to understand that everyone's human and everyone has the ability to do right or wrong. We got to get rid of this mind frame that we have on this whole issue. But anyway, I recently had a conversation with a church member, and I was disappointed at how that conversation went, because it started with me posting two videos. One video was a Caucasian male that had a knife that was chasing the cops around, and they were apprehending him, and they were just they didn't shoot him or anything like that. The chase went on for a while. This guy's walking around with a knife trying to stab the officers. They didn't shoot him. He got out of that alive. They took him to jail, whatever the case may be. The other video is an African-American male who, I don't know what happened prior to the video, because people kind of argue that point, but the only portion we see of the video is the black male walking to his van where his kids are at and everything like that. And he's resisting, he's not following the police's instruction. He opens his door to get in the van, and he gets shot 15, 16 times in the back, however many it is. So I present these two videos, and a member, a peer of mine we go to the same church, he's Caucasian male, he commented on my post, and we had a little conversation about it. Long story short, we went behind the scenes. Instead of doing it live on social media, we went to Messenger, because the conversation got a little bit more deep. What I was trying to relay to him was that in both of these scenarios, regardless of where it was at in the country or another country, whatever the case may be, in both scenarios, the African-American man is always getting shot or killed, most of the time. in the situation where the white guy had a knife, had that been the black guy, I'm a firm believer that the black guy would have got killed, right? So I tried to make that point to this individual. It didn't go well because he came back to me, and keep in mind this is a church member, right? He said that, John, well, didn't the white guy put his knife down? I said, after so long, yes, but the point of this is, if I had that knife and I was running around chasing these officers, I'm dead. I firmly believe that, and can't nobody tell me differently. So long story short, that conversation happened. I still have to do a follow-up discussion with him because we're not seeing eye to eye right now, and I always want to piece things out. But that's where I'm at with it. I think to lead that into you guys giving your thoughts, there's multiple different views on this issue, and I think it really takes all of us to educate ourselves on the actual issue. And I would like to see more people get on board with what is right and stop being so patriotic to where you're like, police can't do wrong. They can't, they're always right, and they know what they're doing. So it has to be that this black guy did something wrong. We need to unite, and we need to point at what's right, and we also need to point at what's wrong, regardless of what uniform people are wearing. So
and just to clarify real quick, J. Rob, were you talking about the Jacob Blake case? If so, I think it was 7 times he got shot in the back.
Yeah, Jacob Blake.
Yeah. Just to clarify things for our listeners or whatever. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dirk or Jack. Either one of you want to?
Oh no,
take a stab at that and tell us what your thoughts are, what your feelings are on this.
Yeah, give me 1 second. My Chihuahua's going full blown German Shepherd on me. Sorry, somebody's walking a dog outside. But no, yeah, with the Jacob Blake thing though, it's I don't know if you recall when I commented on your thing, John. I said this looks to me like a bad shoot. And that's the thing. And I always try to stress to people, because most people that know me or are friends with me on social media, I get a lot of slack for because they say I'm either a MAGA, which if you ever look at my posts, I've never once praised the man, said he's doing a good job or anything. I actually always say we deserve better. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't know all the ins and outs of the job that he's doing, but it's just, I don't think he acts very presidential, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, the first thing I said was this looks like a bad shoot to me. But the other thing I always say is it's not to jump on the bandwagon. It's we need to get the whole story. Like the same with the Mike Brown shooting. Everybody was saying hands up, don't shoot. That was later proven to be a lie. I'm not saying the kid deserved a death sentence by any means, but we didn't have the whole story before everything went forward. Now, to get to your point about you being shot, was that the case? I think it was down in Texas where the guy was running around a blue truck saying, "Go ahead and shoot me."
So something. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Had that been a black man out there or, a Hispanic man, in my heart of hearts, yeah, do I think the guy would have caught a bullet or two? More than likely. Now, having said that, do I think it's a racial issue or is it more of an economic issue? Because, I didn't grow up in this country. I grew up in South America for the most part. My mom's South American. And so, it's not I can't give you white America's opinion, but I can meld into white America quite easily. No, for me, and just with my professional background and education, it truly seems more like an economic issue. Having said that, why is it an economic issue? People of color tend to be more poor in this country. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. So when it comes down to that, poorer people tend to commit more crimes. Police are already at a heightened state when they go into those areas, thinking, okay, I could get killed today. That's why, like, City of St. Charles, for example, hasn't had a, complaint about excessive force in I don't know how long. And it's not to say St. Charles is an affluent area, it's just it's not a poor area. Whereas if you go literally 2 miles across the river, you start getting massive complaints about excessive force because it's, not as economically well off, therefore. And I'm not saying it's right, it's wrong. The police need to be better trained on this.
So let me ask you this, Jack. Do you think racism still exists?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. I'll never say it doesn't.
So to your point about, you think it's more of an economical issue. I respect your point of view. I think it's a combination of issues.
Oh, I
It's
totally
not,
agree.
I don't think it's just economic, because I think, to your point, you just said racism still exists. I think we have a mixture of those things. Not all cops are clean.
Oh, no.
Not all of them are bad. We got good cops. I'm friends with some really good cops, but there are those specific police officers who abuse their power, I believe, right?
Oh,
And then
absolutely.
we run into these type of issues. So to me, I think it's a mixture.
Well, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I was telling Chris about it the other day. It's and I don't, a lot of these things, like where B Swagger and I have a pretty good relationship. We always have, as of you and I, since we've known each other. But I generally sidebar conversations, these things with them, because I don't like to put them all over social media, because for one, I don't want to hear the whole right wing cops are all bad or cops are all good, they can do no wrong. I also don't want to hear the left wing of, BLM, cops are just out to get everybody type thing. But the other day, I was out with with my partner from work. He's a mixed kid from Memphis, and we were driving along and we got pulled over. So we get pull over to the side of the road, and you just hear, "Boy, get out of the car." And when I heard that, I was like, I get out of the car and forgive my language, I was like, "Boy, what the fuck are you? Who the fuck do you think you are?" I see a hand go to his sidearm, didn't pull it though, just on it, and said, "Sir, please cease and desist and get back in the vehicle." I'm like, "Why is it I'm sir and he's boy?" I was like, "This is, and the thing really kind of snowballed. Luckily, it got calmed down, and when they ran our credentials and saw who we were, they let us go with an official apology. Mind you, that's an exception to the rule, but should this be happening in 2020? Well, I mean, any other year than in 2020. I mean, 2020 is a dumpster fire at best.
Right.
Yeah.
Dumpster fire.
But I mean, should this be happening at all? Should any individual, be treated like that just on the basis that, they happen to be of a certain skin tone? Absolutely not. Having said that, it's, I understand why the police are on edge too, because if you recall back to those officers getting killed in Dallas a few years ago when all 5 of them got shot down, you had protesters from Black Lives Matters out there chanting "pigs in a blanket." Now, I can't tell you what it is to be a black person dealing with law enforcement in this country. I can't, because for obvious reasons I can't. And I'm never going to say law enforcement's all right, because I know a ton of cops that are great. I know some that are bad. I know some BLM activists that have the best heart and the best intentions on the planet. I know other ones that just are morons, to say, to put it lightly. So I want to know how we can find a common ground so we can all meet in the middle and finally start solving these issues. Because, I mean, one side's not backing down, the other side's amping up, and it's just going to lead to a really nasty conflict if something doesn't get out about it.
One quick point that I want to make, because Derek, he looks like he's ready to chime in and gives the point. So I'm going to give it to Derek in a minute. One quick point I want to make is I think at the point where we could come together is when we all understand, we all look at everything from a human being perspective. I think, and from my own perspective of how I'm looking at everything, it seems you got the side that believe they're so patriotic, they believe that cops are justified in everything they do. Law enforcement is a tough job, and cops have it tough. So 99% of the time, however they handle situations, they're correct. And the reason I say that is I got friends who have police officers as a spouse, and when all these issues come up, I never see them post anything to support, the issue at hand and being wrong, like the Jacob Blake issue or Mike Brown or whatever the case may be. I never see support for that, but anything that's police related that comes up, they jump on it. Oh, blew this, blew that. I need everyone to, regardless if you have a spouse that's a police officer, regardless of if you know someone that's in law enforcement, regardless if you support Black Lives Matter, whatever it is, whatever you're a part of, see things from a human perspective. What I mean by that is everyone is human, regardless of what race you are, regardless of what uniform or whatever you wear, you have the ability to do right or wrong. So if we look at every scenario that happens, every situation that happens, and we assess it based on that and get away from this whole it's an officer, he can't do any wrong, I think we'll be in a much better spot. And one last point I want to make is, I think what would help out a lot, and something that would calm things down, is when these issues happen, more support is provided from those that are on the opposing side, the ones that I never really see when these issues come up.
You guys, I can't hear him.
Can you hear me, Dirk? Dirk, can you hear me?
Is it me?
It might be you, because I can
Might be you, Dirk.
Yeah, I can hear him pretty good.
I hear him.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. Sorry.
Okay. All right, you're good. All right. So I think what would help out, and something that we need more of, is more support when these things happen. There's a lot of people that when they happen, they're silent behind the scenes and they don't say anything. If you know it's wrong, come out the shadows and say, hey, I saw that. Based on what I seen, I know the guy's a cop. I respect cops, but what he did was wrong. I think if more of that happens, then we'll be in a good spot. But right now, you got people that will look at videos that, where what the action or what has happened is clearly wrong, and they sit behind the shadows and they say nothing. The only people that are saying anything is people that are Black Lives Matter, people that are, non-Black Lives Matter, but they understand what's going on, and that's it. So I think it's if you get more support behind that, and we all are fair about every situation. I'm a firm believer that if someone did wrong and they pulled a knife out and they're chasing the cop, if he blows their head off, okay.
So be it. Yeah.
So be it, But I'm also a firm believer if the guy didn't reach in his pockets, he had his hands up, and, maybe he started to run away, or maybe he started to, go away from the officers, and he catches 7 bullets to the back. It's like, really? You couldn't go tackle the guy, or, hit him across the head with your club or something else, not death.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, Jacob Blake lived, but I mean, yeah, I get your point. But, touching on what you said, though, about people coming out that are normally silent, when George Floyd happened, the country was behind that. I mean, I don't know a person that was, I know a couple of people, but I mean, like I said,
I
was about to say.
a lot of people.
a good amount of people, like myself included, I went and marched, because, it was wrong. I don't care that the guy had 4 times, if you want to believe the, whatever accounts coming out now that he had a lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. Doesn't matter. Cop's knee should not have been on the man's neck, in my personal opinion. So a bunch of people did get behind that, but then, all the rioting and the looting and the burning started happening. The problem is, though, too, and what a lot of people aren't looking at is the media played it up like this is getting done in a certain way. The Black community in Minneapolis didn't want that to happen. Most of the people were from out of town, and a lot of the people that were starting the looting, that started breaking the windows, started doing everything, weren't even Black. But then BLM gets the blame for it.
Okay, thank you.
So that's my, what I always try to stress to people. I'm like, just do your research, get your facts. I personally don't agree with the organization of BLM. Now, the sentiment all day, I'm with it because yes, Black lives do matter. I'm not one of those people.
I don't agree with the organization part. I'm just curious at it. I'm not like, I don't march around with Black Lives Matter shirts and flags or nothing, but yeah. I understand the point of it. But why don't you agree with the organization?
Well, if you look at their website, one of the things they say they're against is the nuclear family. I think one of the things that killed the Black community is the lack of the nuclear family. If you go back to, before welfare reform, and Lyndon B. Johnson said his famous quote of, if we get welfare reform through, we're going to have these N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. It made it more profitable to have the man out of the house. So since then, people ask, why don't we have another Black Wall Street? Well, because we destroyed the Black family. As a country, the Black family has been destroyed. What's the easiest way to, destroy people is to destroy their ability to reproduce, or at least effectively. So when you have broken homes and you have a bunch of people being raised by single mothers, that it just leads to more problems, because everybody knows you brought up in a single parent household, you're 5 times more likely to go to prison. You're 5 times more likely to drop out of high school. So an organization that talks about Black Lives Matters, if you're that concerned about Black lives, go protest an abortion clinic, build a school, build a job program center somewhere. They received over $1 billion in donations and haven't built anything other than buy some buses to move people around. So, you know, if you want me to say Black Lives Matter, they do. Why? Because I love you as a human being. I personally don't see people as black. Like, you know, you guys remember my black friends at work. You were just my friends at work.
Right.
Again, having been brought up in a mixed racial household, I was always taught that that wasn't a thing. And it still isn't for me. Never will be, because, you know, there's good people in every walk of life. But that's why I can't stand the organization. The sentiment, on the other hand, yeah, I'm all for it, because, as I said, I can't tell you what it is to be a black man in this country. I recently learned what it is to be scared at a traffic stop. But, you know, it's, you know, do all lives matter? Sure. I think it's cliche, and I think it's stupid, and I think people are taken away from the plight that Black America has been facing since 1619 in this country. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying we've been wrong, we need attention. You know, there's nothing wrong with demanding that. And, you know, I think the time is now, you know, instead of that, you know, time's up movement for the sexual harassment thing in Hollywood, that would have been a better slogan for it. You know, time's up. We can't sweep this under the rug anymore. We're here. We need to be part of this country. You know, regardless of how, you know, Black America got here, Black America is here. And we need to do more to right the wrongs that were, you know, done historically on. I don't think an organization that calls itself Black Lives Matter, that hasn't built one clinic or done anything for social programs, though, is the way to go.
That's a good point. Derek, what do you got?
Well, as apparently the lone representative for 100% white America, yeah, my lineage is like straight Northern European, English, French, German. It's all right there. So, but anyway, I think all of this is really complex, and you know, I think we as humans want to look for simple, you know, straight solutions, right? But I don't think there's one simple solution to it, but it's all intertwined. So how do we go about that? Well, for me, I agree with everything that's been said. It is, you know, like we need to see what we can do as one people, right? How can we get to the point where we aren't separated by what our racial background is? We're just Americans. We're just humans. And we all get the same treatment from police officers or at a store or living in North St. Louis City or living in St. Charles. There's a treatment level that becomes the same across the board. Now, I think that's a generational change issue, and it takes generations upon generations to get there. I mean, the progress we've seen in the last 50 years since the civil rights movement of the 60s is significant, right? I mean, I think we've all worked for Citi or all worked for Citibank at some point. Our CFO is an African-American man, and our CEO is about to be a woman. That's stuff you wouldn't have seen even 20 years ago. Well, you didn't see it, right? Or even 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah. So I think the progress is significant, but how do we continue and move that forward? And I think, for one, the conversations like this are the most important thing. Listening to them, talking to each other. And I think you said earlier, Jonathan, sitting on social media and expressing your opinion is a pretty horrific way to go about it. There is value there because you are looking at something that's probably different from what you think. If you're willing to read something that's different from what you think and accept that it might be true. But the tone is so difficult, and it's really difficult to convey something that you believe strongly without it sounding like you're angry about it. And that's kind of an art form, and most people don't have that or don't look for it to do it. As far as the interactions go, because we've touched on about 30 topics so far, but you know, you started off, Jonathan, by talking about, you know, the police interactions. Jacob Blake.
Yeah.
And that set off all sorts of stuff in Kenosha, right? And then you talked about the white guy with a knife, which I haven't seen that. And then people will produce statistics. Well, 99% of traffic stops don't end in anything. And okay, that's true. I'm sure that's true. But like Jack was saying, what about the feelings? And I think feelings can be overrated, but I think the way, for instance, that Jonathan and Chris, or I'm sorry, I don't know the name. I don't know your
Oh, you can stay, Chris. That's fine,
Fine,
Dirk.
there we go. So definitely, Chris. Yeah, if you get pulled over by a police officer and you don't feel like you've done anything, I mean, if you know you've been speeding or something, that's a different story. But if you feel like there's you don't understand the reason, you have an extremely different feeling than probably Jack or I feels. And Jack said he just became acquainted with the feeling, that uncomfortable feeling, in the last couple of weeks or whatever it is. We got to figure out how to change that feeling, right? And I think that's really, really important. And that has to come through actions and change in the way that we police. And I think part of that is, as we pointed out, how the police deal with people on a stop, whatever that stop is, and how the police don't just stop someone for fitting a description and that's the only reason. And then the second part of it is, and Jack pointed this out too, and I think, Jonathan, you were saying it, we have to be willing to accept that if a police officer speaks up and says that something is wrong, that something might be wrong. Not that that person needs to be fired from the police department. And I think that's the way it's been forever. It does seem we've gotten past some of that in the military, where if someone speaks up, we're a little more willing to listen. But we've got to be willing to listen to the police officer who speaks up and says, we were on a stop and officer whatever, Johnson over here, acted inappropriately because of, and I think it's because of the race of the person. The result cannot be that the person that spoke up is blacklisted or fired. The result has to be an honest and open investigation. And hopefully these conversations and protests and everything that's happened in the last 6 months or whatever since George Floyd can contribute to that being the truth. I think that's the very first step toward everything improving is a police officer being able to speak up and say the truth without going on, without being blacklisted.
And I think you make a strong point because I do think there aren't that many police officers that will speak out against their peer. It's one of those things where there's such a bond there, and there's such a what do you call it? They have such a strong relationship within the force. It's like, hey guys, we got each other's back. When really it should be kind of like how we handle corporate ethics. If something is wrong, I don't care if it's your boss or your peer, it's wrong. You need to go report it, and you need to do what's right regardless, right? So the same thing with police enforcement. Maybe they need to build a stronger code of ethics that says, hey, we're all police officers. We do have each other's back because I support them having each other's back. But when you go against the code of ethics, then you need to be reported. Don't support what is wrong, but most definitely report something if it's done inappropriately.
I agree with that.
Dirk brings up a great point, though, and I can show you guys some cases where the police officers that did speak up, like Dirk said, were fired or they were moved to another department or moved to another area or something like that. So
desk jobs. They were put in a desk or put in records or basically just removed.
Exactly. So that means the whole culture needs to a look at. I'm not one to say maybe the branding is wrong when they say defund the police. Maybe there's a different brand or label that we could put on it, but definitely reforming, and not just the police department, but I say the whole Justice Department, the prosecuting attorney, the judges, and all of them, taking a look at their track record. If I have shown that as a judge, I have shown disparity against anyone that doesn't look like me, then maybe as a judge, I need to be looked at. Same thing with the prosecuting attorneys, same thing with the police force or whatever. So I wouldn't say defund them, but maybe allocate some of those funds, because I know what the whole meaning behind defund is, and that is to maybe take some of those funds that are used for like military weapons and use it for, some training or some other things for that community that are needed.
Community policing.
Community policing, right? Because if you look at Wentzville, I probably see a police officer, once or twice. But if you go to the city, they're everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
Right.
But I know, Jack, you said that maybe in low-income areas the crime rate is higher. That's not exactly true, because if you look at the FBI report of 2018, it shows that yeah, although blacks do perpetuate, some violent crimes or whatever, it's not more than any other particular demographic, right? Now, it's probably condensed. And yes, I hear the term black on black crime, which I really don't like using that term because, of course, anybody that lives close to you, you're going to probably have more dealings with them. Thus, crime, because there's other ethnic groups that live together, their crime is perpetuated by people that are like them. It's about 90% for white America. It's about 90% for, Asians, and like 95% for blacks. But anyway, I say that to say that I believe that there's just a change, and I'm hoping that these type of conversations pushes forward that change so that we, change the way that we police, like you said, Jack. Community policing, because I live in Wentzville now, and you know what, a neighbor sees something, we're going to say something, and you don't have like 4 cops driving up behind you and telling you to get out with your hands up, but when I was living in the city,
different story.
That was just, we already knew to assume the position.
Yeah, but you get on about, you mentioned the whole defund the police thing, which I don't like the term. I think it's poorly. I think it was a poor choice of words. I think.
Yeah, that's why I say maybe a rebranding.
Well,
I know exactly
think
what they mean.
I think hyphen fund the police. Take the same funds, reallocate them to better stuff. Like Truth and Consequence, New Mexico, for example, got 2 military grade vehicles. Why the hell do they need 2 big? You don't.
For U.S. citizens.
Yeah, you don't.
Who are you fighting, Pablo?
Yeah, but you're worried about crime and everything else, which everybody should be. Like I said, get back to the community. Community policing would be a good way to go about it. Instead of getting these guys, rifles that look like Navy SEALs would be carrying them. Get some books that they can share with the kids. Invite the people in. Acquaint yourself. Walk a beat again. What was the difference between 1955 and now? Police used to walk a beat in their neighborhood. They knew everybody. They knew the store owners. They knew oh, hey, how's Timmy doing? How's school? It does take a village, but we've removed the police from the village.
So here's the cool thing that you mentioned, Jack. So I mentioned this on Derek's podcast that here in Wentzville, the police, they do the best that they can to interact with the community. They have a program right now where just it's kind of open to anybody that lives in Wentzville, where if you have a block party or you have some kind of gathering, you can invite Wentzville PD to that party. They come, they hang out in their uniforms, they interact, they drink beer, they have fun with everybody, they talk with everybody. That's something that I've never seen in my entire life. And whenever
we have more of that, that would definitely change the dynamic between the police officers. Yeah.
Whenever Wentzville PD came out and said, hey, we're willing to do that because we really want to get to know people within the community, I thought that was a great idea, because now the police are more connected. Now, you're not looking at, and I would never say this term because I disagree with it, but you're not looking at the police as, oh, that's a pig. That's you know what I'm saying?
That's
now,
Mike. That's.
Yeah, now it's more like, hey, I know Officer XYZ, or hey, I know Officer whatever. They always come hang out with us and we have a conversation, and get this. Let's say an interaction happens. And some of those officers who are kind of used to you and they've been around you, they know how you are. It's not going to turn into one of those situations where it's you get 5 holes in your back. It's going to be one of those where it's like, hey, John, I need you to chill, man. I know you're upset, but hey, put it down and let's talk about this. Let's take you back to the station. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those interactions that ends up being a good end result.
Yeah, so when I see stuff like that, it really brings a lot of joy to me, because I remember when I was a kid, there was he was just a patrol officer. He ended up retiring as a major, but he would just drive around our neighborhood all the time, would always stop us, see how we're doing, gave us baseball cards. He even helped me with my algebra homework one time because I didn't get it. His last name is Walker. Guy wrote me a letter of recommendation for college. To this day, I would go to bat for the man. It's one of those things where cops need to be cops, but they also need to be part of the community, which, with this whole rapid response team, it's just been too militarized is the problem with it. And it's really going to remove the human factor of it. The damn thing shouldn't be political. Police should be about protecting and serving. That should be it. Protecting and serving, though, serving goes to, towards what you said, though, the block parties in Wentzville and everything of that nature. I think that's a great idea, and I think we need more of it. I think we need more of that than we need to, get night vision goggles for these guys that are running, traffic stops. And it's not to take away because they're necessary. You know, they're necessary. You know, cops are a necessary part of society because, let's face it, everybody has a capability of acting a fool. But yeah, I just think that a lot of it goes too far as to, especially with like a lot of these far right people that think that cops are like these sacred, entities. I mean, don't get me wrong. I respect the office. I respect the uniform. Sometimes that's all I respect, though, is the uniform. And yeah, these, cops, they need to be making this, they need to get that, I'm like, shut up. Because all it does is further propagate the problem. And when cops can get to know their community, they can help solve the problems of the community, as compared to just cleaning up after the community, I guess you could say.
To add to that, I want to point out something that I think has been a historical problem. I don't want to go on a tangent, but I do want to, because this could be another podcast topic. But something that doesn't help out with anything is as you mentioned earlier, Jack, the media. I think the media paints certain things in a certain light where people draw up these stereotypes in their head. If every time you turn on the news or the TV, you see a black guy with dreads getting, with a knife, hurting somebody or killing somebody or shooting, and the only news reports that you ever get in your head is black people doing something bad, it creates these negative stereotypes in people's heads, and it further promotes the actions that we see happen to African American people. It doesn't help out at all. Something else that
well, Jonathan, that type of propaganda has been going on for ages, ever since slavery was abolished, right? I can show you an old newspaper article where it talked about how the black man's going to come and rape your babies or rape your wives, or
what was that movie, Birth of a Nation?
Yeah. But that type of stuff was real, and what we're seeing right now is the remnants of it. It's still going on. It's just not as overt as it was back then. Now it's kind of like, subtle type things, just like you said, in the media showing that that's all that blacks do is, commit crimes. But if you look at the FBI report, you'll see that, no, we don't commit more crime than anybody else.
But,
it's just that it's pointed out. Ours is more highlighted than anyone else or whatever. So that's one of the things, to your point, Jonathan, that we probably need to, I don't know where we start, but to get people to understand that some of this propaganda that's going on about Black lives is not necessarily true.
Well, Chris, I think this is where we start, though. But, you touched on something about, back in the day. Back in the day, we didn't have things like Facebook. We didn't have mass media. People, the only way they got information was by doing what we're doing now, by talking, sharing ideas. News got spread word of mouth, as compared to now. It's like, oh, you see that meme? Oh, my gosh. Yeah, it's and it just snowballs from there. And I mean, I don't know how to say this lightly. The other part of the problem outside the media is just our education system, for one. They're not teaching the kids how to learn. They're just indoctrinating kids anymore. And now it's like, you see Portland has been burning for over 100 days for Black Lives Matter. Bunch of the cops out there are black, and they've been getting all sorts of, they've been complaining that these kids are just giving them racist taunts the whole time. Like, you have the biggest nose I've ever seen, calling them boot lip, moon cricket, things like that. And I'm like, these kids are out there protesting for Black Lives Matters, doing that to a black cop? I was like, please quit white-splaining to me what racism is. You're from Oregon. The first blackhead you ever saw was probably in the mirror when you were popping it. No, it's just, it's, it's, and I'm not trying to make light of it, because this is, we talked about, it's just the media has ran wild with it, and we don't talk anymore. So I think the best way to do it, we have to go to alternative media. We have to put stuff like this out. And, like you and I, we have sidebar conversations a lot, Chris, because if you and I had the conversation we had on our wall, there'd be no way we could do it, because you'd have idiots from both sides jumping in saying all cops are bad.
Yeah, that's why we talk.
Trump's going to take our country back.
And I always encourage people to get on something like this where you can talk it out, because the thing is, we should respect point of views, but we should understand where people's thoughts are coming from. Jack, you made an excellent point earlier where you said, hey, when you're looking at these situations, it's always good to get the complete story. I totally agree with you. Whenever I had that conversation with my church member, that's one of the first things he pointed out. One thing that he said to me, he's like, John, everybody's always jumping on these videos, and they see like they see a 1 minute clip of the video, but they don't really know the full story. I'm the type of person where I like to see the entire thing to understand what's going on. My perspective was, yeah, I get where you're coming from, but from what I seen, it looked very bad, regardless of whatever other pieces of video you want to see. But something to add to where I was going with some of the issues, that's an extension of the issues. And this is a whole other topic, but I want to put it out there. It doesn't help that, these different music artists put a lot of things out in the atmosphere that portray Black people to always be looked at in a negative aspect, having guns and having bags of dope and this and that. I don't support that. But I tell you what, every time I cut my TV on and see these music videos, that's all that you see in these videos, and it does not represent Black America at all. It's a small portion of African Americans who choose to live a life of drug dealing or whatever the case may be. But the music industry and the media glorify that. These people are they're being looked at as heroes for getting rich on selling dope and carrying around guns and popping their peers and things like that. So that does not help nothing, because that further builds the stereotypes that Black people are a threat.
Yeah, and Chris and I were talking about that the other day. It's about Tupac in particular.
I love Tupac.
So do I, but Chris pointed out something.
Wait a minute, you just said it's a problem.
But no, it's Chris pointed out something really interesting to me, because he asked me, he's like, "What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Tupac?" And I was like, first thing that came out was like, he's an angry Black man. But Tupac had a lot to say. It's just, yeah, but to sell records, did his record label move him towards more of a getting away from the positive message and getting more into the whole thug life thing? And yeah, it's just the media is, if anybody can honestly say, I don't believe that they're a dividing force in this country. I got a beautiful bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell them. I think the media and the powers that be that run it, their biggest fear right now is something like this, where you have three men of three different ethnic backgrounds that can get together, have a very civil conversation, not entirely agree on everything, but still just be civil about it and not blow up and be pissed off at the end of it.
So Dirk, I would tell you this, because I want to clear up my comments here. I'm from California. I got family members in LA. I've been around it. I'm cold. I'm there. I'm very deep into California. So I grew up on listening to Tupac. I would tell you this: there are certain things that he did that I don't condone. I get it, right? But if you do your history on the man, and you really kind of follow some of the things, he was a smart brother, man. He had a lot of
intelligent dude. Yeah.
Very intelligent man. Although he, sometimes he didn't portray himself in the best way that he could. Trust me, he was all about, bringing up the issues of social injustice. This thing has been going on for a while. He was an intelligent guy. So yes, I don't condone some of the things that he did. I think it was nonsense, but on the other hand, he was an intelligent brother. So I want to clear that up.
Can we talk a little bit about? I got you. That's fine. I was just teasing. So on social media, so we've all kind of mentioned that being on there ends up a lot of times being more divisive than unifying, and we prefer like this format, just talking, like having conversations. And since we have the internet and we all know how to use Zoom now, we can do these conversations. I think that 9 months ago we were all like, how would we do that? But is there value to being on, let's say, Facebook and talking about an issue and having people that are unwilling to listen on any side of an important issue expose themselves? Because I'll tell you, until George Floyd and until this year, I wasn't sure. If you had asked me, are there a lot of blatant racists left, I would have said, I really don't think there's hardly any, right? Now we've seen it, and I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but we see people's comments, we see people, what they say and what they're willing to espouse in public, and we see that people are getting into their tribes again on these social media, right? Like I'm in my, and if you choose to make your tribe based on your skin color or your culture or whatever, I guess that's your choice. But for us, like I say, the four of us probably are in this tribe of we're middle class people just trying to make sure we've all got a chance as Americans, right? I think we're all looking at ourselves as Americans. And there's a challenge where, like, if I throw an American flag on Facebook now, there'd probably be a lot of people that took offense to that because I look like I'm trying to say one thing when, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. So is there value to having those discussions in a public format and allowing the people, allowing someone that is unwilling to listen to another person on any topic and just believes what they believe, allowing them to say that out loud so that we can A, expose it, and B, maybe have an opportunity to talk to that person? Because if we stay in this little 4-person circle, it's highly likely we're not going to have influence on the Nazi that lives in the hills of Montana, and you know, or whatever it is, or the racist black guy that lives in the city, you know, whatever it is. They're probably going to tune in for 2 minutes and tune out, and we don't get that person to have that conversation. So where's the value of that, of saying, you know, hey, we can't support what you're saying, but still, that's a person, and we need to be realize that the reason they think what they think, there's a reason for that. And if we listen to 10 or 100 people of similar ilk like that, maybe we're able to influence 1 or 2 to improve. So where's the line? Where do we draw that line?
Well, you know, you touched on something, Dirk, that I actually wrote a paper on this, working on my PhD right now, and part of my paper was curing social ills, right? So my whole thing, and this is why I was a huge Bernie Sanders supporter, and I say that, throwing in the caveat out there, don't judge me for it, I voted Republican most of my life. But Bernie has some good ideas. Now, part of the problem, and why I go back to it being an economic issue, do you know how much a cop in the city of St. Charles makes to start out?
Probably.
About 40,000,
Upwards of 70.
30,000, 40,000.
70.
Oh,
What? Who?
About 70 grand. Cops in St. Charles City are making around 70 grand. But you know how much a cop in the city of Berkeley makes?
Probably that 30 to 40.
$12 an hour, give or take. At the time of the Mike Brown shooting, I think Darren Wilson was making somewhere to like $14, $15 an hour. So that is part of our problem, is we have all these little municipalities. They all have different budgetary issues, everything like that. Why not just get a more broad state police force that can have good pay, get better requirements for their officers? You know, because like part of the St. Charles City thing is you have to be a college graduate. I think in some, you know, North County municipalities, you just have to be able to count past 10 with your shoes on.
hey, stand this dude.
But no, you're getting people with limited scope education, and you know, I don't want to say been indoctrinated, but they've been taught or learned, albeit wrong, that yeah, you know, black man is a threat, this neighborhood's a high crime area. Just because a neighborhood's high crime doesn't mean that everybody there is, you know, high crime. We're talking maybe 2 to 3% of this, you know, the area is involved in some sort of criminal activity. The rest of the people just want to go about their day, get to work, you know, do what they do and live their life. So that was part of my thing, is like, why should St. Charles County or why should West County get the best police officers when they have the quote unquote least amount of trouble, so to speak, as far as high, you know, violent or, you know, high crimes go? So my thing was, I'm like, yeah, we need to redistribute the police funds as compared to giving it all the areas that don't quote unquote necessarily need it, and getting them to the areas that do need it so they can be policed properly by people with the proper education, the proper training to overcome that. Mind you, when I said that to a couple of my friends who were, you know, ardent Trump supporters, I got shot down with, yeah, you don't even want to, you know, I was called everything under the book. And that's the other thing that makes me laugh about it. You know, it's any more nowadays you express any opinion that doesn't agree with somebody one way or another. You know, we have a mutual friend, we'll call him D, not to get into his name, but I'm sure you can figure out who it is though. Always goes on about how much of a MAGA I am because I don't just agree with everything he says wholeheartedly. Like, you know, call me what you will, that's fine.
I think you just like stirring the pot, Jack. That's just between me and
some
you.
issues, yeah. You know, sometimes when I see somebody going off on some stupidity, I'm like, okay, cool. Let's just see how far I can twist this top before he pops.
We're talking about Massey here, because I'll say names all day.
Okay, yeah, but you know, and he's always going on about how much of a MAGA I am, about how, you know, he's like, you need to be more woke, blah blah blah. I'm like, you know, Dwayne, we've been friends since we were 10 years old. Get over that now.
I'll cut that part out.
No, that's fine. But I'm like, you know, And that's my thing. It's we've been friends for 30 plus years now, and now all of a sudden I'm a bad guy because I don't agree with what he has to say on something.
And here's my thing. I'm gonna go back to what Derek said. So I think it's important for people to get out their points of views. I think it's wrong when someone says something that you don't agree with to automatically put them under fire and just condone them. Okay, because here's the thing: we all come from different backgrounds. We all have a different level of understanding. We all have different experiences. So it's not that what we're saying is bad or wrong or anything like that. You're saying something from your perspective based on the experience that you've had. And I'm a firm believer when I'm talking to people, I'm like, hey, I kind of understand where people are coming from. Not that I agree. I understand it because they haven't been accustomed to some of the things that I've dealt with. So from their perspective, since they've not dealt with this, it's hard for them to understand. Because
Exactly.
They've never been at a point where they get pulled over and they're paranoid and the cop is like, hey, you boy, put your hand. They never dealt with that. So when I say it, it's foreign to them and they're only speaking from their experience. So I'm, back to your point, Derek, I'm all for people having a different point of perspective. And I do agree that it's productive to have those Facebook conversations. But I think where people disagree on things, this is the platform to kind of talk it out. So those individuals where, let's say, the George Floyd incident, you have a bunch of people out there to say, hey, yeah, you know what? The guy was a druggie and he had a history. He deserved to die. I want those people on the podcast. I want to talk to them.
On.
Yeah, I want to get them on because I have a different take on that. I don't think that what the events that occurred should have went down. I don't care what that guy's history is like. You mean to tell me, as well as you guys know me or have known me, if something happens to me, they dig up some crap that I did when I was in my 20s, you guys are going to be like, oh, well, John is a bad person. You guys know I'm not a bad person.
Yeah.
You just know that I was a kid and did some bad things in my past.
But that's what we see all the time. They demonize the ones like Tamir Rice, little 12, 13-year-old kid who was playing with a toy gun. Cop rolled up within 12 seconds, killed him. They demon. How can you justify demonizing a kid that just got killed by a cop? But they do that with every one of the victims or whatever. We demonize the victims that have been killed by the police officers, unarmed, by the way. But then we salute or we celebrate somebody that went out and did something, Yeah. So I have a problem with that. But it's one thing for me as a black man to talk about it, but it's another thing for an ally. If you think about like the women's movement, the pride movement, and all that, they were able to progress, to see some progress because they had allies that weren't necessarily part of that affinity, right? So my question back to you, Dirk, where you were asking, well, both of you guys actually, but Dirk, you pointed out, having those conversations with people on Facebook. There are some people that are overtly racist, or Billy Bob might be racist, whatever. But then there's some people that live in a bubble that don't necessarily, like Jonathan put it, they don't deal with it. So it's hard for them to fathom that this is really an issue. So my question to you guys is, how do you take someone that maybe not necessarily a racist, but they're not aware of their blind spot or not aware of their bias? How do you, what type of conversations, or how do you get them to see that there really is an issue with disparity of blacks in America?
Go ahead, Dirk.
Honestly, I think first of all, you have to realize you can't change somebody, right? That's up to them to change. But I think that I think you have to get off topic. And what I mean by that is, so let's talk, Jack was saying earlier, we tend to label things so we can categorize them easily because our human brains, that's an easier way for us to live. So I can categorize Chris and Jonathan as black. I can categorize Jack as white until he tells me that he's half Latin American. And I can say, well, now he's half Latin, so I'm putting everything in categories. Jack likes red shirts and Jonathan likes to put John and Chris like to put backgrounds in, so we categorize stuff. I think that conversation, if we can start talking to people about, okay, so you're saying, so let's talk about, you say that I'm MAGA, right, Jack? What do you mean by that? Can we talk about what you mean by that? And if you can get onto that conversation, then that's going to be a more productive conversation than talking about the issues that led to someone calling you MAGA. So Jack's saying, whatever, I don't agree with Black Lives Matter, the organization. Well, you're MAGA. Okay, well, can you tell me why you think I'm MAGA, right?
Right.
And Chris, we've talked about this on a podcast at our job. One of the things you talk about is the 5 whys, and it's not necessarily 5, but you keep asking why until you get to that root cause. And that can apply to a conversation. So why are you calling me? Why do you think I'm MAGA because I said that? Well, because clearly Black Lives Matter. Black lives do matter. And you say, well, I actually agree with that. I just have trouble with the organization. Can you tell me what it is about that part of it that makes me MAGA? And then, and you keep going down that path if that person is willing to talk, because some might not be willing to talk and some might just say, whatever, it's MAGA, I got to go buy groceries, And that's common. But I think that if you get to the heart of the matter and say, why do you believe that I deserve that label? I think that is the opening to a conversation that can lead somewhere, as opposed to, well, I'm not that, screw you, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
So here's a good thing. So earlier when Jack was talking about, that he's a firm believer that Black lives do matter, right? But he doesn't support the organization. Had he taken that same tone and same energy to Facebook and typed it, he would have got stones thrown at him at his glass house, right?
Yeah.
It would have been ugly because people really would not. They would have only seen the first part where it said, "Oh, I don't really agree with the Black Lives Matter organization." They would have took that and ran with it, right? But
he would have got heat from both sides.
He would got major heat. But the thing
but
is,
he likes it.
Not for me, because I understand it. I always want to go to the root cause and understand things further. I don't take people at their word on Facebook because we need to have a thorough conversation. So I really don't get into those conversations and debates. But getting on something like this where Jack is allowed to elaborate and some of the stuff he said makes sense. I got to go back and do a little bit of homework now based on some of the things that he said. I think it's a great thing to have. He said, look, John, I'm going to be honest with you. All Black Lives Matter. I agree. But the organization itself, when you look at their website and their mission and this and that, I just don't agree with it. Now I'm doing my homework because he made some.
That makes two of us. I'm going back to do my homework too.
I am. So that's kind of what I'm. That's a good point.
Touching on Dirk too, though.
If I can, in the same stream, throw another curveball, and this will be like my last question. So in the NFL, the Chiefs and I believe the Nationals. Is it the Nationals? No, that's baseball. But anyway, the Chiefs and the Texans, I think, were playing.
Yeah.
And before the national anthem, before anything went on, all the players locked arms in solidarity. They weren't kneeling at the flag, which we know about that conversation, but the crowd still booed. And they were locking arms in solidarity and unity because they were standing saying that, hey, you know what, we want to see some racial equality. We want to, say that we all stand together in this, and the crowd still booed.
Here's my thing, Chris.
That was part of my question to you guys, asking how do we get people to a place where they, see that I'm living in a bubble and maybe I do need to take a look outside and see that there's some things that are going on that may need me to be an ally to help to progress that message or, to move the needle forward.
Here's my deal, Chris. So when I looked at that, I didn't, unless we have a thorough conversation about why people booed, they could have booed for any reason. They could have booed because the team that they love so much was locking arms with the opposing team that they hate. I don't know. It seemed to everybody, I don't know. It seemed to everybody that it was because they were locking arms for the whole social injustice deal. I don't know. But the thing about it is someone made a good point on Facebook. Regardless of whatever the case may be, people bought a ticket to go to the game. They have a right to cheer and support a touchdown happening, or they got a right to boo because something went bad. I don't. That situation.
But how are you going to? I'm sorry, I can't justify booing unity. People standing in unity, locking arms.
I agree.
I'm sorry, I don't buy that.
I agree.
Period. I don't care who you are.
I support unity. To me, the whole unity thing, it was for the support of social injustice and everyone coming together. So I'm on board with that. I just, certain people in the crowd were booing. It could have been the racist portion. It could have been the Billy Bobs. I have no idea why people were booing. I don't know. But whatever.
Here's my take on it. And just tune them the hell out. You know, I mean, if they want to boo, let them boo. We're not going to be able to save everybody. You can't. Not everybody's teachable. Now, you guys know that I was never a big fan of how Cap started his protest when he was just sitting down for the first couple of games. That upset me because
we've had conversations. Yep.
Yeah, he was sitting down through the anthem. That pissed me off because it's showing disrespect, in my opinion. My opinion is not absolute by any means. I didn't like the fact that he sat down.
Well, Jack, what do you think about that now? Because I want to.
Let me finish. Let me finish that.
Okay.
When he decided to take a knee, though, I was all for it. Now, you guys, Dirk, you probably don't know what I do for a living. Chris and John, I think you do. We fight daily for your right to make that expression. But also, my thing of it is taking a knee. I'm like, you take a knee when you pray. You take a knee when you propose to your wife. Taking a knee to me is the ultimate sign of respect. So
you kneel when you pray to the Lord. Okay.
Yeah. So my thing is, I don't like Cap. I don't have to like him to say his protest is just. I don't have to agree with what he's stating. Because, like, I mean, the man wore a Fidel Castro shirt to a press conference in Miami. That'd be like me walking into a black church wearing a Confederate flag saying, you know, he needs to do some more homework before he tries to teach, is what I'm saying. That's not to say that there's not social injustices in the country, because there is, and they need to be addressed. I respect and applaud his efforts to take a knee during the anthem, because to me, that's an ultimate sign of respect. Sitting down, I hate it. The problem is, as Chris pointed out to me one time, he's like, you got advanced degrees, you're highly educated, blah, blah, blah. The majority of America is not. You know, the guy that flies a Confederate flag in the back of his truck, maybe one or two will be willing to listen. The majority won't. But then again, I mean, on the other side of the coin, I have a black friend who is very pro-Trump, bashes him all the time on social media, will not admit to it in public because he says it'll make him look bad in front of his peers in the black community. I think that is also something that we need to work on. You know, it's just everybody is so West Side Storied on their own. You know, you're either with us or against us at this point. When can we get back to the point where we just say, hey, we're all getting screwed over by the federal government on taxes. We're all Americans. What can we do to make this country better since we're all here?
Amen.
Derek, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. A couple of things I think that I did read that some of the players didn't hear any booing, and like, so it didn't sound like it was as pervasive as maybe we think it was. And I think that goes back to the media discussion. Because I literally read that some of the players and people there did not hear booing or heard very little of it, while some of them did hear it. So I don't know how that went. But I also think that it goes back to the same thing that I was talking about earlier. If you're, that's a 2-liter.
You know? I'm thirsty. So.
All right, so I think it goes back to earlier. You know, each of us is one person. So if we were sitting at that football game, and you're sitting next to somebody that boos, maybe you strike up a conversation with them. Hey, can you? I was just wondering, why were you booing? And you could say that as an adult, and if they get pissed, then just move on, whatever. But I think probably half the people would probably have a conversation with you about it. And the more that we're willing to have a difficult conversation with somebody about something we disagree with on a one-to-one basis, the more opportunity we have to make positive change and make headway. And because it's going to take a couple more generations minimum before, you know, I hate to say it, but it is generational stuff.
It is.
And,
Absolutely.
you know, we still have, I was talking to my grandpa. My grandpa was 93. I was talking to him last weekend, and his eyes were open with George Floyd. He's 93. He's from Chicago. You know, he's not from the South. He's from Chicago. He said, I hate to say it or I hate to believe it, but I have probably been racist at different points in my life, not on purpose or not because I believed I was being, and I've probably been too accepting of thinking, you know, this is a 93-year-old man saying this.
Yeah, that's nice.
And that's why I think the things that we're saying and the way that we influence our children can be a significant thing. But our children won't be our age for 20 to 30 years. So what can we do in the moment to make changes? And I think the most that you and I can do, yeah, we can vote. That's true. And I think that's important. But having these conversations one-on-one when you disagree with somebody, Jonathan, you said you had to disagree with somebody. You jumped over to Messenger and had a more in-depth talk about it. Do that, you know, and be willing to say that this person who booed the football game is telling me they did it because they don't like Black Lives Matter or whatever. They don't like the Texans. I don't know.
Right.
But you don't know till you talk to them, and then you don't know, and you say, well, I was bullying because I hate the Texans. It's like, well, you realize that in this current climate, you standing up and booing while they're locking arms makes it look like you're against Black people and white people liking each other, right? And they might say, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Yep, I
But if
agree.
you never have that difficult conversation at the front, if you never lean over to the next seat and talk to them, if you never jump on Messenger and say, hey, can we talk? You never get to that point. And again, you've labeled him. That's the guy that booed. He hates unity. Oh, who knows? Maybe he just, really, really hates the Texans. I don't know.
I can justify hating Texas, but
Yeah, right. Well,
I can
the team, the
justify that
football
too.
team, the Texans, yes.
Yeah.
Derek, you make a
but
good
no,
point.
it's
You make a good point, Derek, because one of our executive leaders at my company, he said for the longest time, he's had this blind spot where in his world, the Caucasian male, in his world, these things that are being brought up and on TV didn't exist to him. Even though he saw it on the news, even though he saw Cap kneeling, even though he saw the certain police incidents, it was still something that didn't exist to him because he's like, hey, it's that the guy probably had a knife or who cares? He got what was coming to him. But he said it was not until he had a conversation because a lot of people, they have a diverse set of friends for the most part. We live in a world now where if your only peers and friends are the people that look like you, then you got a problem to me. Like you got to have more than just that. But it wasn't until he had a conversation with his African-American brother, his neighbor, someone who comes over to his house and eats, their daughters and sons play together, that guy, that he woke up and realized like, hey, this is a problem because my brother is coming to me and telling me like, look, man, I've been dealing with this for a while. I know you're comfortable and when you get pulled over, nothing happens to you, but here's what I deal with. And when he had that conversation, what happened was it transpired into him sharing that with the company, which doesn't happen a lot. You don't hear too much of senior leadership coming out and saying, hey, this is wrong. We need to move like this, whatever the case may be. It's starting to happen now. But at a few of our town halls, this particular leader came out and said, look, we have to start talking more. We have to start having conversations. And the people that haven't been accustomed to these issues have to really sit down and listen to the people that have had these experiences to understand and be educated on it so we can get on board. I think, to your point, Derek, that's what needs to happen more. Productive conversation. Facebook is okay. Typing is okay. But taking it from that and having this, talking it out so we can discuss different perspectives.
And I think you brought up one, I'll say this real quick, but I think one of the things too is our fault too, Jonathan, that you mentioned, because we go through it, but we don't really talk about it. I don't just go around saying, hey, you know what? I might tell it to my wife. Like the one time I was driving and this cop was at the light and he saw me, he looked right at my face and he followed me like almost all the way home. And I wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just following me. I'm like, what did I do to deserve you follow me? I made a left and I made a right. And the whole time he was following me, right? But I don't just go around talking about these experiences, right? But I think maybe that's part of the thing, like you said, maybe having those conversations with individuals that don't even realize what we go through. And then maybe, opening their eyes, whatever. We had a similar thing at where Dirk and I work now. Well, all of you used to work, but Dirk and I still work there. Our CEO came out and talked about the racial inequalities or whatever that, and he had his eyes opened as well. So I like the idea of what you, Jonathan and Dirk, were talking about, having more of these conversations or whatever. I think it is definitely important. But there's still so many out there. I think one of you mentioned that have blind spots, that have unconscious bias. I don't even realize that I'm being biased, right? And that's everybody. Everybody that walks on this earth has an unconscious bias, whether it's to a racial group or whether it's because of low income or whether it's, I'm biased for ladies with an accent, that's why my wife, never mind.
Hey, You and me both.
But
Chris.
everybody has it, and I think having these conversations and maybe helping our brothers and sisters understand that, I think will help bring the needle forward.
I
I
agree.
think-
So we're kind of at the hour. I don't want to close it quickly, but I want to make a quick point, and then everyone will have their opportunity to kind of to share what they need. But I think from my perspective, conversations are great. We need to have conversations more. One thing I think that needs to happen as well is how people are portrayed in the media. I don't think that's going to be something that happens quickly, but over time we need to change that perspective because people. Believe it or not, everything they do, where they get the news from, where they get their information from, it's either social media or the news, and it's kind of impactful because if you're just looking at that, then you're going to think every black person or every cop is horrible. You know what I'm saying? So we got to change that. Something else that needs to happen more, and something that that has bothered me is people who are supposed to be in your corner. You got friends that are of a different ethnicity or different race than you. You got people that you go to church with. They got to start coming out and being more supportive. And I don't mean support as in marching with you or kind of following the same ideals that you follow, but more than anything, listening to your concerns and really assessing whether or not it's something that they need to step up and also be a supportive of voicing their concerns alongside of you. I don't see that enough. I got neighbors, I got buddies, I love them to death, but anytime these issues come up, I don't see them post nothing. I don't see them talk about nothing. They talk about camping and everything else, but when it comes to black issues, I don't see enough of, hey, here's this video, guys. This is wrong. I don't see that, and there needs to be more support. So I just kind of wanted to point those things out, it's something that's been bothering me for a while. I'm a black male, and I've dealt with these issues. As Chris said, I don't talk about it enough. Sometimes the reason I don't talk about it is because I feel like, it's been ongoing.
Oh, there he go talking about this stuff again.
Yeah, it's John Robinson ranting on about his life issues. Like, well, here he goes again. And so I do express myself. I do share things. I don't go on rants. I do it every now and then. But for the most part, when the time is right, I'll bring these things up. But I don't share every experience that I have. Maybe I should. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. So that's kind of my little take on it a little bit.
My take on it is this. It's, there's an old parable about a guy who was on the beach and waves kept coming in and they were bringing all these starfish up on the sand. And he was just throwing them back as fast as he could. No matter how much he did, though, more starfish kept coming up, and somebody came up and said, "What the hell are you doing? You're not going to save them all. It doesn't matter." And then he just looked at the guy and he showed him the starfish that was in his hand. He said, "It matters to this one." And he threw it back in the water. So my thing is, if by doing this, if we can sway even one person on either side of the equation to just open their mind a bit and get away from their blind mindset, we've accomplished what we set out to do. So my thing is, let's all work on our one starfish, because, we're not going to change the nation. But if we change it one person at a time, the nation will eventually change itself. So.
Amen. I like that.
I like it. So we kind of given some in thoughts here, but we are at the hour, and I want to respect everyone's time. I know we got other different things that are going on, so I do want to give everyone an opportunity to kind of give some kind of final thoughts and feedback or whatever you have before we close this thing out. So we'll start with Derek, and we'll make our way around. So go ahead, Derek.
First of all, can you say Dirk's name right, Jonathan?
Yeah, I said Derek. I said Dirk. I corrected it. I said Dirk. Go ahead, Dirk.
I get at the drive-thru all the time. It's fine. So, hey, Jonathan, I'll echo the same thing you said. For me, what started opening my eyes was that we had the Stockley verdict in St. Louis in like 2017. It was a young man being chased by a police officer and shot and killed, and the police officer was acquitted, and there were protests. And I sat down with a black lady that I worked with at the time, a peer of mine, and we had lunch, and she was protesting, and we talked about that, the whole thing. And she gave me her story of growing up in the projects and how she was raised and people around her belittling education and reading and just the whole thing, the whole story of hers. And just listening to her and understanding her perspective opened my eyes. And of course, the George Floyd thing, I think Jack was right earlier when he said that changed a great percentage of America and how we look at it. Changed my 93-year-old grandfather's, mind and stuff. But I think if you could sit down with somebody that you respect and know, who is in a different tribe than yours, and hear what they have to say and accept that what they feel is true, whether you feel it or not, that's the first step for all of us to make toward being one America together.
My personal take, I agree with you wholeheartedly. My last 2 cents to put in, it's okay to have a different opinion as long as you can speak about it civilly. For the people that are all, we got to get after the pro athletes. Me personally, I haven't watched pro sports in years, so I don't care. I kind of tuned it out a while ago. Just got bigger fish to fry, too many small kids in the house. But I mean, the same people that are saying, they're disrespecting the flag have no problem using an American flag napkin, American flag boxers, American flag plates.
And that goes against the Constitution.
Yes, it is. What's worse, taking a knee for the flag or wiping your mouth with it? So at the end of the day, it's my point is education. Education with love. Don't throw it in somebody's face. And I'm guilty of doing that too, because I'm an ass. I'll admit it. I pop off sometimes. But no, just educate with love. And I think that is the most valuable thing we can do for anybody. Because it's not so much putting somebody in their place. It's just showing them that the world is so much more than their place.
Good deal. Chris?
One of my takeaways is that we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Some of us are already used to being in uncomfortable situations or in uncomfortable conversations. But even that, we shy away from those uncomfortable conversations, even though it's probably more valuable to have them. So my takeaway from this whole conversation is becoming even more comfortable with getting uncomfortable, if that makes sense at all. Having those tough conversations so that we can understand one another or whatever. So I'll say that, and then basically finding our blind spots, realizing that we all have unconscious bias. And, working towards a better me. I like what you said, Jack, about the one starfish at a time. Maybe that's why I get so overwhelmed sometimes, because I tell you, man, I'll pick up my phone and I'm looking at Facebook and I'm looking at comments and I was like, her too, him too. Oh, my God. And it gets overwhelming because I get just tired and weary of trying to explain things to people, and but if what you said, Jack, really touched home with, one starfish at a time, if I get just one person to become an ally and to realize that it's not just about a political view, but it's about injustice. And that's really my main goal and my main purpose for having these conversations, is to just highlight or help people realize and identify that there is racial injustice still going on in America. And even though we're in 2020, we should be in a lot better place. Yeah, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go.
Good point. So my final thoughts, real quick, is just I think it's a benefit and it's very productive if we just have these conversations. I think when you get on Facebook and you start typing away, it's okay. But from what I've seen, when we discuss these issues on Facebook, I see a lot of comments and I see lots of different points of views. A lot of stuff gets taken out of context and people have these debates and arguments and it goes south. I've seen it and it always happens. People it almost causes an issue where people start hating each other, or they dislike each other, they start defriending each other, whatever the case may be. I'm all for people having different points of views because, as I told you guys, we all grew up different. We all have different experiences. We all have different perspectives. That's okay. But I think getting on a platform like this, talking it out, and really having a productive, podcast or a productive session is the best way to kind of help people see different angles. And I'm not saying that, someone who was that doesn't agree with Black Lives Matter or Kaepernick kneeling is going to now jump on board or anything like that. But I mean, I think it would help for people to understand the different points of views, whether you agree with what's going on with Kaepernick and Black Lives Matter or you don't, whatever. We just need to talk these things out. So my final thing is, I appreciate everyone on the podcast. Dirk, thanks for coming out and having this discussion with us. We appreciate you, man. And Jack, thanks for joining and giving your
Anytime.
I think this has been a great podcast. So we'll invite you guys back when we have some other type of topics. And this was a good one. So I appreciate everyone.
Thanks,
Hey, real
Jack.
quick, I would like to plug. I know Dirk; he's being very humble, but Dirk has a very successful podcast where he interviews a lot of great, amazing people, and I want to plug that for you, Dirk. I've been checking out. I think the last lady that I looked at was dealing with cancer or terminal cancer, or whatever. I can't remember her name or whatever, but very upbeat, wonderful soul. And everybody that you talk to has been really a joy to listen to. So anybody that's listening to this podcast, check them out. Real amazing people with Dirk Pointer.